All right. Welcome back to the channel, friends. I am the GM philosopher, and with me today is William. William is an experienced GM, 34 years of GMing experience, and today he is here to listen to four of my, I would say, most prolific, infamous, well and badly received homebrew items I've ever made in my whole GMing life, in my whole career. This was a hard thing to narrow down, but I think I've narrowed it down to like the top four. Some of these got great responses from my players, and my players absolutely hated some of them. So we're going to give William a chance with his experience to roast, give critique, give feedback, and even some tips relating to these homebrew things. So we're just going to go through these. But before I dive too far into that, I want to give William a chance to introduce himself. And William, you also have a YouTube channel. Please talk about that for a moment before we dive in.
My name is William. Sometimes I go by DM Ramos on my YouTube channel, which you can find us in Dungeons and 20s. Still a relatively new channel that we're trying to get up there, but 34 years I've been playing. So I love making homebrew and trying to go back to my childhood years of imagination and creating new things. So yeah, let's see how this goes.
All right, so we're going to start it off with something pretty, I would say, minor as far as the list goes. This was a staff of twin casting, and I made this item during a campaign where there was particularly, I was making kind of a magic item I thought would appeal to each one of my players. For loot when they defeated this monster, and for the wizard I created the staff of twin casting. And basically what I did was, it was a staff that would 3 times per day give him the option to cast 2 copies of any spell he was casting, with the drawback being he had to make a Constitution saving throw versus the DC of the staff, which I don't remember what it was. It was relatively high. And if he failed 2 of them, so if he tried it the first time and failed, he didn't get to cast a spell at all. If he cast it the second time or the third time and failed it, he would be knocked unconscious for 24 hours, just like literally unconscious. Very little could be done to bring him out of it. But if he succeeded at all of them, he would get to cast, he could cast like up to 3 times per day, 2 versions of basically any spell he could cast. He ended up seriously abusing this magic item. He ended up putting a whole bunch of stuff into getting his con way high, so he never failed saves. And he was just abusing double spells the whole campaign. So anyway, that's how it turned out. It was super fun and funny. May or may not have regretted giving him that. But okay, first thing, staff of twin casting, what do you think?
Staff of twin casting. So is this with any kind of leveled spell, or just
this? Yeah, there was no spell cap level limit. It was anything he could cast. He could cast 2 of them if he was using this magic item.
In one action?
Yes. It was like,
oh, wow.
As he was casting a spell, the staff would allow him to cast 2 copies of it. The only thing was he had to roll the save every time he used it.
It
was almost like a passive.
Roll the save, but still that ability to be able to just do that and cast. I mean, you could have like anything from 2 fireballs up to like, oh, let's make 2 wishes. Could he do 2 wishes?
He never did, but he, in theory, could have. There were many incidences of twin fireballs, many.
Twin lightning.
Wall of Flame was another that he was a big fan of. Many Wall of Flames, 2 copies.
I guess as long as it was toward the level of the character themselves, and they were still kind of restricted to what they could go. I mean, once you get to level, I don't know what, 16 and start casting level 9 spells, I don't know if the save itself would be pretty balanced out, especially since if he could just increase his constitution. That's quite powerful. I know I've made a couple of mistakes myself before with creating homebrew items where I gave people some ability to cast more than one time. So I don't know. I think I would, if I were to rate it as a 5 stars, maybe a 3, just because.
3. Okay.
I don't know how much I would work with it, but I would be scared just because of the con save on that part. I would probably maybe add something, just because I know they can manipulate it and take it up. I may maybe add something that's a little bit more prerequisite to it, a little bit more of a punishment just in case. I mean, it's a good punishment when you're young, not young, but lower in level. But once you get up there, it might be a little bit different.
Yes, yes. All right, excellent. Do you have any tips for the viewers about homebrew items that involve casting copies of spells? Any tips?
Definitely a little bit more on the punishment when they fell, I would say. I don't know. I'm very particular with when it comes to spells because that can just overbalance. So you definitely want to make sure at least that depending on the campaign that you're in and the world that you're in, for sure think about that balance. I know we get into the thing that we want to create things and make it new and unique. And we're like, all right, I'm going to give my players this and see what they can do with it. It's fun, it's new, they've never seen it before. And then all of a sudden, oh man, they're just slaughtered like 12 people that were like 10th level. And I have no idea what to do. I'm going to have to try to take it away. So yeah, I would say balance for sure is one thing that at least the first thing I think about is make sure that it's balanced.
Very good. Now, when you said take it away from them, that's quite apt for this next thing I'm bringing up. Now, this actually wasn't an item. This was a creature that I homebrewed. And the reason that I homebrewed this creature was because I found myself in a situation during one campaign where I had given out so many magic items that they were just, I mean, the party had just magic items upon magic items. And I thought, this is certain to draw the attention of something, So I created what I called a sunder beast, and it was sort of a play on a rust monster. But what it was it was a large sized creature. It walked upright. It had like kind of like cloven feet, sort of like a minotaur, but it had the head of like a squid. So it was kind of like an illithid head, and it had these 4 tentacles that come out of its mouth, and it would punch with its fists to like do damage, but then it would grab magic items with its tentacles and eat them to like power itself. So it had 4 attacks every turn with its tentacles just to snag magic items and stuff it into its mouth. And then if you didn't get it out within like a turn, he would chew them up and swallow them, and they would be destroyed. So this was called a Sunder Beast. My party universally hated this creation. They hated me. They were very mad at me when I sent this after them. Before they realized what was happening, they had lost many precious magical items. I kind of think it was mean, but now it's sort of a fun folklore at the table. Oh, watch out. If it has tentacles, double check. We don't want to fight a Sunder Beast. Okay, so anyway, they did end up killing it, but at great loss of magical items. So what would you say about this homebrew creation?
Well, as a DM, I think I would actually love it. I mean, personally, because I mean, come on, as DMs, we made some mistakes here before and given some magic items. I've done it too. I'm guilty of. You know what? I think you need a magic item for you, a magic item for you, one for you, and then you're like, oh, what have I done? They're going all over the place. I need to stop this somehow and maybe take them down a notch again. I kind of like that. What, Sunder Beast?
Yeah, I called it a Sunder Beast because it would sunder the magic items when it devoured them.
You know what? That is probably something that I would actually do. I don't think I can. I would probably give that a 5 for
5 stars
as a DM. Because I would
awesome, player, excellent.
I don't know if a player. Yeah, I could see where if I got like a sword of sun power or something, and it's like unique, and then like, all right, let's do this. You ate my sword. You just gave it to me. Oh.
All right, excellent. So sounds like very little roasting on this particular homebrew creation. If you were going to give a tip to the viewers about, maybe creatures that either destroy magic items or things that remove magic items, do you have any tips for GMs about this kind of particular niche?
You know what? I would definitely, just think about like how I said, as far as, sometimes we do just make mistakes and we give a lot of magical items. Of course, you don't want to make your players angry or something, you want to give them that agency. And I don't know, I just feel out the group, see how they're going to react to it, if they're going to play with the lore and make it into an actual back. The thing about like making a homebrew item is we're excited about it, but at the same time, it could be a creature or a magical item. But the reason you want to make it is for them to also experience it and make it part of their lore. and be part of that actual experience of creating a story that you're probably going to tell somebody else in another session. So yeah, I mean, even if you create a creature like you said, it's part of a lore now, and you can go back on it and have memories about it. I think that's good. And I don't know, I just can't. I love that one. I love that one. You definitely want to be able to make sure to read the group and make it part of the actual story and make it make sense.
Yes, well said, well said. All right, and speaking of lore and world and making sense, those are good terms to maybe describe what we abandoned when I created this next homebrew item. So let me give you a little bit of a backdrop here. We call this Finley. Okay, so basically the group fought a necromancer at one point. And this necromancer was very powerful, and they defeated him. But now, of course, they had to find I'm sorry, when I say necromancer, I mean lich. So this creature was a lich. They defeated the lich, and of course, they had to find the phylactery. So they're searching his quarters, his laboratories, basically looking for things. And they find this orb underneath a cloth sitting on like a pedestal in his laboratory. So they remove the cloth and they look at it, and it's like a little snow globe. And it looks like there's a small kingdom in there. There's like a castle, and they see a bunch of like people moving around and like, what is this? This is so crazy. And then while I'm holding it like this, like they picked it up, but they didn't pick it up yet. They're looking at it. One of them picks it up, and then everyone in the room has to roll a wisdom save. And then they all roll wisdom save. They all failed it because it was a very, very high DC. If they were in the room, there were some NPCs outside the room who had a lower save who actually made it, but all the PCs were in the room. So they all roll too low to save, and they all get sucked into this magic item called Finley. And what it is a little pocket dimension world contained within this little snow globe. But inside of this world, time moved extremely slow relative to the real world. And there was a whole little kingdom in there, and they had they had like a pretty big like land, but it wasn't like the whole world big. It was like, it was like big enough for like one feudal kingdom. And then they had borders that were like these mountains inhabited by monsters. And every night, once it got dark, zombies would just storm the castle. And so this was their whole life. They'd like grow crops, and there was this whole kingdom of like humans living in this orb, sort of trying to survive from this like darkest night sort of like situation. And they had in the middle of their castle this sacred machine, like an orrery. It was like this kind of astrological thing. And they had these old partially completed manuscripts basically describing how they could contact the outside world. They called it like the heavens. They believed that they could maybe escape from this world if they could learn how to turn the machine on and open the portal. But alas, the machine was actually broken, and they didn't have sufficient information to repair it. So they were like stuck here. So the players get zapped in here, and then they have more advanced knowledge of magic, and they were a bit higher level. I think they were like level 12s about that point.
Wow.
So at first they're like, well, these zombies aren't going to be a problem. We'll just wipe them out. And then they almost die in the first zombie attack. And then they're like, okay, we have to get out of here. So they and then there's all this bureaucracy, and like the king didn't want them messing with the orrery because it was his sacred machine. And like the wizards, there's like a council of wizards, but they weren't actually very good wizards. And they actually couldn't use magic, which was really interesting. They were more like wizards of knowledge, and they were like super defensive. And so there was like some of the party members were trying to play nice and go through the bureaucratic process. And then there's some who are sneaking around the castle trying to gain access to the hidden documents. And so, but in the end, what ended up happening was they ended up overthrowing the government, getting the peasants together, working out the lost parts of the manuscripts, fixing the orrery and turning it on, and then escaping. And they brought two of the Finlians with them who became NPCs, who came to like the two who like helped them the most. And they escaped from it. And then they locked it in a chest and said, we are never touching that. We are never touching that thing again. We never want to do that. But the crazy part was that they didn't, by the time they got out, over 2 years had passed, and a whole war had been fought in their actual world. And a bunch of their allies were like in a very sad state because their side was losing the war. Like they were winning it, but then they got sucked in. So then they were missing for 2 years. Everyone thought they'd been captured by the enemy. So like, it's like a whole rearrangement of the military happened and all these things. So it was like this really big plot changing event that all happened because they got sucked into this place and time slowed down for them. They were in there for like a month, but out of game, it was like 2 years past. So anyway, there we go. The world of Finley. Even to this day, when my players hear it, they're like, no, stop it. Don't even talk about that place. It was fun, but it was like not fun. You know, it was one of those things. So anyway, there you go. What do you think of this magic item?
I also love that one, yeah, because I have something similar in my world, where I don't know, I just love to sometimes have a passage of time in the real world while either speeding up or slowing down. And I like the way that you link it and have that conflict in there, because I believe that homebrews should have some way to express that story and also have a way to link conflict to it. And then they come back out and there's another conflict. It's like not in the way of like, you know, confrontation, but where are we now? We're 2 years ahead. So much time has changed, and you know, we're in the losing side of war. I do love that. I love story. I love story. I love when you can add some sort of lore, but at the same time, it's like we never want to do that again. Another 2 years past, where are we going to be? Yeah, I've done something like that, without actually, I don't know. It's probably something I would like actually love to experience, in a sense, just to experience it. It seems very, you know, it's isolated and it doesn't really affect the rest of the world. So if you want to take your people out for a little bit, have them go on a different adventure without affecting the rest of the world, that's really nice, because they can do whatever they want in there and not have to worry about consequences in their actual lives and stuff. Of course, that would also depend on what friends they make inside there. So no, I do love that one, actually. You make it very hard to try to figure out some, aside from not wanting to experience it and being stuck in it as a player, as a DM side, I do love that. Yeah, I don't think I can give it any kind of negatives aside from if I was a player, so please don't do that. Please don't throw me in there.
Yes. Okay, well, hey, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, well, that's true. Like some of the players did have loved ones who had a very bad time while they were gone, but then they kind of re-emerged, and it was like the enemy was like, oh no, we thought they were gone. So it was kind of a heroic return moment, which was kind of a fun thing. But anyway, all right, awesome. So if you could give a tip for the viewers, items or situations that pull them out of the world or that especially alter the flow of time, do you have any like tips or rules of thumb that you follow when you create situations or items or even, you know, magical effects that do those kinds of things?
I think, like I mentioned, you definitely want to create something. You have a link to that environment. Definitely that kind of gives its own lore and story, and it's something different compared to what they're used to. Kind of like they're going into an alien world. So if you're going to do something like that, isolate it, make it its own unique thing that's maybe sometimes it has different rules. Sometimes it has different physics, and that'll break that, what is it, like a pattern interrupt or something, you know, and we're so used to dealing with this world, or maybe we're playing a module in D&D, or, you know, we're already used to your homebrew world, and you know, we're already, oh, he's going to be another zombie or it's going to be another vampire. And all of a sudden you bring him into this world. Really think about that world, make it unique and something that fascinates the mind, because it's mysterious now. We don't know the rules. We don't know the monsters. We don't know the people. It is something new, and that breaks that monotony of already knowing what you know. I think that's one of the main things. And then you can play whatever conflict in there, and you know, you have new rules to play with now because it's your home brew.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome. Very good advice. I love it. All right. And that leads me to the final one. And this was probably of all these things, this was probably universally the one my players liked the most, even though at first they were quite thrown off by it and didn't quite know what to make of it. And a little bit of context. And this is actually, when I say homebrew, this is a race, and especially one member of like a homebrew, like created race that the players encountered. And so I had an epic level campaign. It was tying up a very, very long campaign, actually a 3-arc campaign where the players were getting ready to fight the big bad. And they were actually ascending. In my world, there's like the mortal realm, and then there's a God's realm, and the gods sort of have a world there. But if mortals wish to ascend to the gods world, they have to walk what's called the path of gods, which is this very dangerous kind of between worlds world where there's many dangers, and the gods will try to sabotage you. And like there's actually people and creatures in that world specifically designed to keep mortals from being able to go through it. But the players opened the gate and they were heading out. Them and their army were headed to the realm of gods to fight the big bad, basically. To actually help the gods fight the big bad is what they were doing. But anyway, on the way, they encountered all kinds of wild stuff that tried to stop them. But one of them was this thing, and she came to be just known as Sherissa. But they encountered her, and at first she was this golden orb that floated above the trail, like quite large. You know, it was like 12 feet in diameter, basically. Like so, this floating golden orb. And it started out with one of the players. They would cast like detect magic. Oh, it's very magical. Trying to identify it, can't identify it. So it's like, what's going on here? They run all these tests from a distance, can't really figure out what's going on. So one of them gets brave enough to walk up and touch it, and then they see him get sucked into it, like magically, right? Not so unlike in the movie Sphere, like the old movie, but rather than a door opening, he just got sucked up into it. And when he went up into it, he was on this, like in this world, like on this road, there was this apple tree, and then there was this girl with red hair who was the same race as him, human, basically talking to him, saying like, "Hey, who are you? How'd you end up here?" And then, you know, it's this kind of weird thing. Turned out that whatever this thing was, had the ability to like kind of like capture people inside of it. It could scan their memories, and then it could create a very, very vivid illusion world around them and kind of hold them prisoner inside of it. And so it could project this entire world and make it very believable. But it could also, and it could do this with a number of people. Like there were at times the whole party were inside of this thing and just running around doing things. And at times they were like, we're having trouble keeping track of whether we're inside or outside of Sherissa right now. Like, but she ended up becoming their friend. And what she did usually was, rather than walk around as a golden orb, she would actually embody the human she would embody inside of herself, like kind of like her projected version. She would like become like them to be more accepted by them. So she'd walk around and talk like them and, you know, kind of act like a human. And she actually joined them on their journey, but she would mess with them. And at times she would like just like absorb them. And the thing about her was that there was like no defense. There was like no save. There's no nothing.
Oh, wow.
If she was in the vicinity, she had the power to do this, but she turned out to be very friendly. So on one hand, it was kind of like very, very powerful effect, almost something that the players couldn't resist unless they took great like precautions, like premeditative precautions to protect themselves from it. If they were just hanging out with her, they were vulnerable to this kind of thing. And there was even one kind of weird arc where two of the players ended up accidentally reliving their whole life story inside of her just because she wanted to do it with them. So she was like with them the whole time. And then when she spit them out, they were like, wait a minute, now I have two memories, two different lives. One was with you and one was without you. And she's like, well, the one with me was obviously better. Like she just like would mess with them like this, but she ended up helping them fight the big bad in the end. And she was very instrumental because she tried to use her power on the big bad, but unfortunately it was way too powerful. And in trying to do it, he actually killed her. Like his power was too much, and she died trying to like assimilate him, but she distracted him enough to give them an advantage. So it was like, that was kind of how, but they ended up bringing her back, but that was how she kind of ended in the arc. But anyway, she ended up being one of their friends, and sort of a controversial, possibly overpowered kind of thing that kind of turned out to be a friend to the PCs, and they all universally liked her and thought she was awesome. But anyway, so there you go. Final one, probably the most, I would say, actually controversial of all the ones so far. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely walking the line of player agency for sure. I know I'm big time on player agency and having them be able to do, I mean, I got some powerful creatures in my world that I like to throw in there, and but at the same time being very careful of having them able to at least resist certain powers. Of course, if there's a god that's involved, and as long as it's part of the actual story and it makes sense, I'll go along with that. Definitely Yeah, that is some powerful. And you said that it was also a human race, or
No, so the race, her actual racial form was that golden orb. And
Mm.
there's no, they would always ask her, well, what race are you? And she'd be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, we're not really around anymore, you know? So
Oh, okay, I get
she
you.
never really gave any context. But she was so she was on the path of gods though, which would indicate that she was stronger than mortal, but not yet a god kind of like character. So that's kind of the symbolism of it.
So that's what the characters find out. How about you? Did you know what she was and all the backstory for her, or were you just kind of going along?
I do have a vague backstory for her, which basically amounts to she's the last of an ancient race
Okay.
who were very powerful illusionists, not humanoid actually, but they assume humanoid forms to blend in with humanoids, and they tended to be almost Fey-like in that they were sort of almost like they like to prank and play games, and they tended to be good-natured and like good aligned. So almost sort of like a Fey, but a very abstract version of a kind of a Fey illusionary type creature.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just asking because I know that sometimes I will put some interesting character in there and they're really wanting to know the backstory. And I'm like, okay, I better make sure I at least have some details and history of this if they really dwell of like, all right, I gotta give them something now. They've been
Yeah.
constantly at it. But yeah, I guess the only one on that one, yeah, it depends. Like you said, she could just make her abilities just fall on the characters, no save, no nothing. I guess that's the controversial part you would probably have gotten from.
Yes. Yes. For sure.
Okay, yeah, that's the only part I would probably have been weary on. Like I said, I'm very big on player agency. I've had some players even tell me about what is it, a succubus charm, and they were trying to fight against it. And I was like, I'm all for player agency, but technically, in the way that the player handbook says, you won't know until the charm is over that you were charmed. But I get it. They still some people still don't like that, and yet when you have your homebrew, I guess that would be the only thing that I would probably give it a 4. I know if I was a player, I've had it done to me before, and I couldn't do anything about it. I think a long time ago we were big into trying to get some gods in there, and we played around with what gods would do, and I was like, oh, wait, I mean, I can't do anything at all. What are you talking about? So I guess as a player perspective, that's the only thing I would probably, yeah, I'd definitely be controversial on that one. So probably a 4 on that one. 4, maybe 3, just because I'm pretty big on, yeah, pretty big on at least trying to fight some way through sheer willpower or something. But then
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
yeah, again, if it makes sense though in the story, it's a very hard balance right there.
Yeah. Well, I always maintain that in such cases, like I feel like players can role play their way out of things like that,
Mhm.
like coming up with things and it's like, well, let's see if that'll work, roll dice. I think that if I were going to go back and do it over again, I probably would dial back the zero save effect and make some kind of save, and that kind of thing. Probably would have made her less powerful in general. Like if I were to go back and do it again. So yes, no, I think I could totally. I think it's for myself. It was one of my more controversial creations. That it turned out okay, but it could have gone wrong if it would have been a little bit. If she would have been a little less friendly, it probably would have went
Yeah,
not so
yeah.
good. With that being said, do you have any tips for the viewers about homebrewing stuff that does things like that, like entering people's minds, controlling thoughts, controlling what they see, their perception of reality?
I think it will go back to, yeah, like not taking away too much player agency, having an ability to at least for them to either through role play and testing out and calibrating with the players and how much role play they like, and then just testing their limits a little bit or talking with them for sure, session 0 something. And then as far as that goes, yeah, definitely, something that you would want to test the waters and make sure that they're not too unhappy with that. You definitely want to make sure that they can at least find a way to eventually maybe fight it off or at least protect themselves about it or at least have some sort of investigation that they can do to find clues on how to better, keep that power away from them and then you give them their agency back. But other than that, yeah, it's always something nice to have some powerful creatures out there. I do have a lot in my world too, so I walk that thread, that fine line too. So
Very good. All right. Well, that's all my items or homebrew creations, I would say. Thankfully, I didn't feel like I got to roasted to death. So we
yeah,
survived.
you actually
We
you did pretty good.
survived.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that being said, I'd like to wrap it up with basically a tip. I would like you to, just in homebrew in general, if you're giving advice to GMs, people who are maybe new to the game and want to homebrew some cool stuff, weapons, magic items, races, worlds, even whatever, the homebrew process, what advice would you have to people who are kind of like, man, I don't know, I'm unsure about this homebrew thing, I don't know really how to do it, don't know how to get started, whatever? What advice, general advice, would you give? Because you and just to give context to everyone here, William is actually like homebrew, like serious homebrew, even creating an entire world state. Like you've created an entire homebrew world state, very fleshed out, its own pantheons of gods. I mean, you've only shown me a little bit of it, but it looks really incredible. So just context here, William is high level homebrew expert. So anyway, yeah, your advice. Sorry to cut you off there.
No worries. No. Yeah, I mean, gosh, there is a lot of things with homebrew, but if I were to pick, I might pick a process, and maybe a couple of good tips would probably be, for instance, I have a queen of vampires. The way that I would like to do a homebrew is she has a ring that gives her protection from the sunlight and radiant damage, right? And so that way she can at least be unique, that she can walk out and have a little bit more level of power than the other vampires she's over. So that's one thing for homebrew. Make it unique to maybe the creature or the location. The other thing is that it gives it power for being able to control the minions and the castle itself, for maybe layer actions. So I know it's kind of powerful on that one, but the reason I would do that is because now it creates conflict. So now you have other vampires who want to seek the ring and maybe overthrow her. So now you got something to play with and make it into a plot of some sort. And then, just make it unique to the story and the lore. So, now you got some story to go behind it, because the queen made it. Why did she make it? And why does it do what it does? So, the three things, make it unique to a monster, maybe make it unique to the environment and location, and then make it unique to the story and the lore. And so my last tip, make it like when we were kids and we played with G.I. Joe and made a whole big world. Homebrew is the one time that we have to go back to our childhood and create things that we can't do as an adults nowadays, because we have so much realism out there in the world that we have to be in. But now that we have a D&D game or some game that we can allow our imagination to go back to our youth, you make it cool for yourself because you love it, but also make it cool enough that players would also enjoy being part of it, and be it an experience, a mystery, an ability, a power. I think I said this before, a pattern interrupt, something that is new and unique they get to experience, that is not like a zombie or a vampire to see every day, or the same magical item they see every day. And then most importantly, make sure that the home brew becomes part of their story as well, so they can create and add to the lore of your world as players, because that'll make it important to them. So yeah, hope that helps.
Yeah, actually, that last piece of advice I really love, because I think that is really important to help players make it their own, like add to the lore, really connect. When you give players that opportunity to create their own story, that's when the real magic happens, I feel like. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, William. That's going to be it for this one. You guys can find William it's Dungeons and 20. Is that right?
Correct. YouTube.
Dungeons and 20s. So for anyone who wants, the links are going to be in the description. Please go through and follow, give a thumbs up, and subscribe to William's channel. Really awesome stuff. So William, thank you so much for being on the channel. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And that's going to be a wrap for this one. Had a little bit of a connection issue. Me and William got disconnected there for a minute, but going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us. And hey, I'll see you awesome people on the next one.